Threats to entrepreneurship and innovation and how to address them. I'm going to talk about regulatory threats and obstacles, of course. But before that, I want to talk about what I consider to be the biggest obstacle, which is psychological. And I know we have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs in this room. If I think I don't have the skills, the knowledge, the relationships, the passion, the perseverance to start and grow my own business, I'm not going to be able to do it, even if I do have all of those resources. And if I believe I have those resources, I am going to be successful, even if I don't have them. So psychology is so important in entrepreneurship. And to elaborate on that, let me talk a bit about my own experience. For the last 40 years, I've lived in a very exciting place, Silicon Valley in Northern California. How many people have been to Silicon Valley? Okay, many of us. It's full of, the northern end, North San Francisco Peninsula is full of companies like these. The main part, the older part of Silicon Valley, the mid-peninsula is full of companies like these. And amongst all of these companies, back in the dot-com bust and boom of the 1990s and early 2000s, I was running a tiny little company called Customer Sat. It deserves to be even smaller than that dot. But if I showed its actual size, you wouldn't be able to see it relative to all of these giants. So this was the year of my life where I learned the most about entrepreneurship, business, and life. Now, to set the stage, the internet first became commercially available and productized in the 1990s. Billions of dollars were invested and overinvested in the internet. Companies like Yahoo, Google, eBay, and others, Amazon, were all founded during that period. That huge overinvestment collapsed in the first quarter of 2000 and 2001. That's known as the dot-com bust. Well, in the first quarter of 2000, I would often, 2001, I would often wake up in sweat-soaked sheets sticking to my skin. Our second round of financing, our Series B round, refused to close despite a flurry of meetings with investors as we ran out of cash. Those nights I would get up, shower off the sweat, and try to get back to sleep. When my management team and I finally realized that our Series B round was not going to close, we huddled to figure out what to do. Tens of thousands of companies, you understand, were going out of business all around us. First, we cut our own salaries, and then a few weeks later, those of all of our employees by 10%. I cut my own salary by 50%. Agonizing and debating over every individual, we laid off 40% of our workforce. 40% of the company I'd spent the last 3 years of my life building. When I assembled our remaining employees to explain to them that this was the only way we could stay afloat and stay together, I felt my composure collapsing, and I broke down sobbing in front of our employees. They stood there stunned, sympathetic, and embarrassed that their CEO was crying in front of them. To help us get through, one of our investors lent me $300,000 for the company, but not to the company, for me to pass through to the company, meaning that I would be personally liable for repaying the loan. Later, I would repay that investor, to whom, despite the arrangement, I was deeply grateful, by mortgaging the townhouse that I lived in Menlo Park, California. To save on rent, we consolidated in a less attractive second floor of our building and rented out the first ground floor to another startup. That startup came in late one weekend night, quit paying us rent after 60 or 90 days, cleared out all their belongings, and disappeared without a trace. We factored receivables. That was, we sold our future receivables for cash today at a 20% discount, an expensive maneuver that you don't want to do routinely. I reduced my salary to the minimum wage, the legal limit. the nightmare would not end. Finally, we could see profitability ahead in the third quarter of 2001. And then, as you know, on September 11th, terrorists attacked the World Trade Center. The entire Northeast communications grid was down. It took an entire day just to confirm that all of our employees were still alive. Finally, the next day, I could announce all customer sat employees are safe. Even though we were 3,000 miles away from the terrorist attacks in Silicon Valley, even there, every company I know of had clients or customers who lost family members or clients in the terrorist attacks. If the dot-com bust of 2000 and 2001 did not kill a company, almost certainly the terrorist attacks of September 11th did. Well, we did not make a profit in that third quarter of 2001. We did break even in the fourth quarter. The going kept tough for the next 2 to 3 years. We didn't hire a single new employee for 18 months, but we made it through. And the company was acquired in the first quarter of 2008. Often I've wondered, why did customer sat survive when so many other companies of our size and cohort, I think it's fair to say most other companies of our size and cohort, failed? I absolutely don't think we were smarter than other management teams. We absolutely didn't have more in the way of resources than other management teams. Customer sat only raised $2.94 million in its entire life. One of our clients, Webvan, famously raised $75 million before its IPO, then $300 million in its IPO, and then declared bankruptcy 14 months after its IPO. So we didn't have more in the way of resources than other companies did. If I had to distill it down to just 2 factors, I would say it was these. Number one, we cared more deeply about our business than other management teams did, about all aspects of it, of the coolness of our products, about the relationships we had with our customers, and about each other on our team than other management teams did. And 2, we stuck with it longer than others did. As I mentioned, it was another 7 years before the company was acquired in the first quarter of 2008. Many other companies just gave up and threw in the towel before that. So in short, it was this combination of passion and perseverance that got us through. The very same passion and perseverance that you can invoke to make your auto retail dealerships or other businesses a success. We hear a lot about passion these days. Every business book talks about passion. That's starting to get boring. Some businesses also talk about perseverance. That's more interesting. No one is talking about how the two reinforce each other and form a positive feedback loop. Passion is an attitude, perseverance is a behavior, and in many aspects of our lives, our attitudes and behaviors reinforce each other and form a feedback loop, either positive or negative. You know how when you stick with something long enough, so you start to get better at it and start to like it, and then start to really get good at it and then start to love it. That's an example of perseverance driving passion. Conversely, if you're already passionate about an activity, you know how the hours can go by like minutes when you're involved in that activity. That's an example of passion enabling perseverance. So you can see how the two form a positive feedback loop. And if you can think of any aspect of your life where you have experienced that positive feedback between passion and perseverance, it's probably a really good area to consider starting a business. I think of passion and perseverance as broadly analogous to the north, south, and east-west axes if you're trying to climb this mountain. If you can only move along one axis, it may be impossible to find a path that takes you all the way to the top. But if you have the flexibility to move along either of those axes, you can find a path that will take you all the way to the top. That's broadly analogous to how passion and perseverance together work together and reinforce each other. Outstanding performance in any realm reflects passion and perseverance working together, whether it's art, sports, academia, entrepreneurship, you name it. And it's not just passion and perseverance, but in many areas of our life, our attitudes and behaviors reinforce each other. You know, we often think, I'm not feeling very enthusiastic today, and so I'm not acting very enthusiastic. But the fact is, if we just start to act enthusiastically, we will start to feel enthusiastically. So there is a positive feedback loop between enthusiasm, behavior, and feeling. Same with honesty. The best way to become honest is to act honestly each and every day. Same with loyalty, same with courage. I find it really inspiring to think there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that differentiates someone who is truly courageous from somebody who merely consistently acts courageously. I can act courageously today. I can act courageously tomorrow. You know what? That's a really inspiring thought. I can be courageous. I can be honest. I can be loyal. Just by acting that way, I can become that way. Now, let me get to the psychology. We are subjected to lots of forces each and every day that are discouraging us from taking initiative and taking risks. Former President Obama's famous statement, "You didn't build that." I don't know if you remember that. How unhelpful, how counterproductive to not give credit to people for what they've done. Fear-mongering is a discouragement that we're exposed to everywhere, every day. Wear your mask, use hand sanitizer, get vaccinated, don't stay at home. Generating fear is a way of creating power for ourselves, or whoever is generating the fear, isn't it? Because if I can scare you into doing something, I have some power over you. We members of the community aren't as likely to cause ripples and waves if we're scared into doing things. This is why I say psychology is the key obstacle to entrepreneurship that we need to be cautious of and aware of. Threats and censorship of free speech and expression. Don't say that, and so forth. Don't think that. So what can we do to counteract this? Well, an exercise that I think is really helpful and valuable for anyone, whether you plan to start your own business or not, is to create what I call your STARS chart. What do I mean by STARS? I mean your skills, the technologies that you know about, your assets and achievements, your relationships, your reputation, and your strengths as in inner strengths. It spells the word STARS with 2 A's and 2 R's. And regardless of where you are in life, a really worthwhile exercise, take out a big sheet of paper, put 7 columns on it, 1 for each of those words, or use a spreadsheet like Excel and make 7 columns in Excel, put one of those words at the top of each column, and write down as best you can all of the resources that you have under each of those categories and look at it. Here's an example. Skills and technologies are those that you've learned both because you're passionate about them and because you formally studied them. Assets could be financial, physical, or knowledge-based. Accomplishments are there to build your confidence. Relationships are both personal and professional. Reputation, how other people know you. Strengths, inner strengths, qualities like courage, creativity, passion, perseverance, and so forth that you've demonstrated. Put them all down. This is a tremendously useful chart for reminding yourself of all of the resources that you have to bear and can draw on. In the book, Unleash Your Inner Company, there's a copy here. Someone will win it before the end of the day. We use this chart in 4 different ways for trying to figure out what's the ideal business for you to start. We use it to assess the fit between you and each of the unsatisfied customer needs that you're considering to satisfy. 2, to see where the gaps are, what additional resources you need to develop or acquire. 3, to build your self-confidence. And then 4, to innovate. And let me just say a word about innovation next, and using this chart to innovate. Some people have the idea that you have to be born an innovator to be an innovator. I don't buy that at all. Anyone and everyone in this room can be an innovator just by combining things you already know in novel ways. And in fact, the STARS chart is a tremendous resource for doing that. The light bulb, for example, we tend to think of a single thing, but it's actually a combination of other technologies, the filament enclosure, vacuum and base, and so forth. Well, similarly, your STARS chart gives you all the resources that you know, and you can look at different combinations of them and try to find a combination that you can uniquely satisfy. No one else has your exact set of stars, do they? It would be extremely unlikely. And so here's a customer need, English-Spanish translation that might be addressed uniquely by this person because they know something about chemistry, they've worked in medical services, and they have conversational Spanish. Here's another one, same-day home delivery of prescription drugs. They know their hometown. They've worked in medical services, and they know something about GPS. So it's a useful tool for innovation. The most important resources on your STARS chart for becoming an innovator are the new skills and technologies. So if there are two new technologies that are both growing, they may or may not overlap. That is, there may or may not be any products or services currently that use both of them. But if you know both of them, you could be the first, or at least early on, to address a customer need that can use both of them. And if these two big circles are growing, the intersection will start out small, but will grow even faster. If you can meaningfully apply a third technology, that intersection will grow faster still. So again, these harbor particularly good opportunities for innovation. So I encourage everyone to track as best you can the new technologies that are either central to or adjacent to whatever area you're interested in working in. So what are some ways to build your self-confidence and willingness to take risks? Well, deliberately expanding every day in some way beyond your comfort zone, whatever that might be. Might be learning a new sport or a new skill or a new technology. Adopt any of many positive human potential techniques. And there are so many good books out there. I'd welcome hearing about what books you recommend on positive thinking. I'm a great fan of Dale Carnegie, who wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. View whatever you genuinely can't change about yourself as an asset. When I was in my mid-30s, I accepted the fact that I'm gay. How can that be an asset? Well, it is an asset as far as I'm concerned. It's helped me think outside the box. It's made me sensitive to the challenges that other minorities face. Think about yourself and what's unique about you that you cannot change. How can you view it as an asset? And read inspirational books like the ones shown here. The best book I've ever read. How many people here have heard of Atlas Shrugged, the novel by Ayn Rand? Many of us. Great. It is a tremendously inspirational book. We so often hear what I call entrepreneurship theater, which is governments giving grants to winning startups, incentivizing target industries, short-term tax incentives, even elevator pitch and business plan pitch competitions where people learn how to pitch, but not how to start businesses. These all have primarily short-term and PR benefits. Often the politics conflicts with the economics. You know, the winning startup is chosen because it's good at DEI or it's green or something, whether or not it's likely to be viable. And these are mostly irrelevant to the hard, real work of creating lower tax and friendlier regulatory environments, which is what the governments should be focused on. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about the psychological obstacles to entrepreneurship and innovation. And again, each and every one of us here has the potential to be an entrepreneur and an innovator. Let's talk about the regulatory obstacles. I started my first company in 1992, my second company in 1997, my third company in 2013. In most ways, over the last 20 years, starting a business has gotten easier. We've got the internet now. We didn't have that back in 1992. We can find suppliers. We can find customers. We can market ourselves. We can outsource entire functions that We couldn't previously outsource. If HR or finance or whatever is not the primary focus of your business, not your strategic value added, you can outsource that, find someone to handle it for you. Software development platforms are much more powerful today than they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it might have taken a team of a dozen software developers that would have taken only 5 or 6 software developers. Today, it might take only 1 or 2 software developers. I remember way back in the 1990s, what a challenge it was just to develop a website that could take a credit card online. That was a big deal 20 years ago. Now, of course, it's trivial. Any software development platform has that capability. So in most respects, virtually every respect, starting a business, in my view, has gotten easier over the last 20 years. There are many more opportunities now. There are many more products and services on the market, so there are many, and each of those products and services creates needs around it, so you could potentially make it smarter, better, faster, help the companies that are providing those services. Only in one regard has it gotten harder to start a business, in my experience, and that is regulatory compliance. My favorite example is worker status law. You could used to easily be able to hire a contractor for as many days or weeks as hours or days per week as you needed him or her to program or to do whatever task. And then as you grew, as your resources grew, your demands grew, you could hire that person for more and more hours and then eventually bring them on as an employee. It made starting a startup with limited cash and resources possible. Now it is much harder. Because of various rules that I could talk about, worker status law, in many cases, those contractors have to be viewed as an employee, in which case you're responsible for unemployment compensation, insurance, health benefits, and so forth, all of which add overhead and cost to the entrepreneur. This may be for an employee who's only working a few hours a week. To justify that somebody is a contractor rather than an employee, you may have to fill out a 6-page form. One small example of how regulatory compliance has made it harder over the years. There's the number of new businesses created for every 10,000 working age Americans has declined over the last decades from 27 to 25 to 22 to the current decade. I don't know, probably somewhere in the high teens, according to this data. And so this bell curve represents whatever measure of entrepreneurs you want, skills, ambition, passion, perseverance, you name it. Whatever measure you want to use for entrepreneurs, there will be some number, an increasing number on the low end, who are being barred. Incidentally, there's a similar curve for minimum wage. Maybe the minimum wage seems like a good idea, but most young people are here in terms of skill and experience among employees. And if the minimum wages are here, these people are going to be out of work. And what does that mean? That means that the entry-level positions where you start to gain experience aren't available to those people, so it's harder to climb that hill. It actually contributes to growing inequality, the fact that we have a minimum wage, because these people are all left behind. It routes investment into software and automation, because if the minimum wage is here and this, what people are worth to me in terms of their hourly rate is less than that, I'm going to invest in software and robots instead to avoid that. We've seen McDonald's and other fast food restaurants putting in automated systems. How sad that they're spending capital on that when they could be hiring many young people who would welcome that early stage work experience. A similar curve applies to entrepreneurs overall. Regulations in all of these different areas, I won't elaborate on them now, but they are steadily encroaching and getting more and more challenging. And so a larger and larger number of low experience, less skilled and experienced entrepreneurs are being shut out. You know, I especially think about people who are new to the United States, have limited English speaking skills, how difficult it would be for them to navigate the legal obstacles and regulatory obstacles. Here's a graphical way of thinking about how regulations limit opportunities. Let's say that this cube represents a big, huge market opportunity, and all of these purple dots represent a business somewhere in that opportunity. They can spread out. They're not competing with each other directly. They can find customer needs that aren't being addressed by others. Now let's say a first regulation comes along and disallows activity in the right side of that box. Okay, well now all of these companies have to squeeze into a smaller area, and there's less opportunity for entrepreneurship and innovation. And what had been a very big win-win environment where people are not directly competing with each other now is turning into a tighter environment. Think of trying to squeeze 1,000 animals into a smaller and smaller space. They're going to be competing with each other, aren't they, and at each other's throats. It's becoming a lose-lose negative-sum environment. Another regulation comes along, makes it even more extreme. Still another regulation, and so forth. Not only that, but as the regulations evolve over time, what had been a flat surface where it's very clear what's allowed and not allowed becomes a more and more irregular surface that takes time and money to explore, advantaging the well-connected, well-funded, and influential, as we've seen from earlier talks today. Think of the more than 100,000 startups that are squeezed into the health and fitness mobile app space. Most of those startups will not make it. Just too many startups squeezed into too small a market space. Well, health and fitness mobile apps are relatively unregulated as compared to finance and medical and transportation and building and so forth, which is why so many entrepreneurs are attracted there. The barriers to entry are low, the regulatory barriers to entry, and if just a few of those entrepreneurs could be freed up to compete in a much larger space in all of those other areas, humanity would advance more rapidly, and and many more entrepreneurs would be successful. This is a beautiful example of what I'm talking about. You know, Amazon for years now has wanted to deliver products and services by drone to your home. But they can't do it because of regulations. Amazon's no-fly zone delivery largely grounded despite a flashy launch because of regulation. So what is the right way to design regulations? Let me offer some thoughts on that. Number one, make them responsive, not prescriptive. What do I mean by that? I mean, they only come into play if there's a dispute that needs to be resolved. If two people aren't going to court over a problem, there's no issue there. It's invoked in the case of a dispute. Focus on the objectives, not the specifications. You know, currently drones are very tightly controlled, only up to 400 feet, well away from an airport. That's understandable. But dedicated operator, only one operator per drone, daylight hours only within visual sight of the operator. Those are ridiculous limitations that mean that that effectively cut off the commercial applications for drones. Drones could be being very useful. They could be painting the second stories of our houses. They could be going over farmland to identify where there needs to be water of crops. They could be used to help identify people who need to be saved from catastrophic events, but they're not being used for many of those applications. Start with the objective. The objective is that drones must be operated safely. Okay, let people figure out how to do that. It means they have to be able to land safely and not destroy property if they run out of juice and so forth. They have to avoid other drones and other obstacles. Start general and evolve to specificity over time. Over time, drones will likely gain the ability to sense and avoid other objects. Great, automatically. As that happens, then that could become part of the regulation. But don't limit the use of drones prematurely because that technology hasn't been avoided yet. And provide large spaces for learning and freedom. Drones may operate up to 400 feet, for example, would enable lots of experimentation and discovery. Here's some more on this. Test on a small scale first. If possible, choose a geographical area or some other area where the regulation applies and not in another area. This serves two purposes. One is it lets us see whether or not it works, and two, it sees how much we're giving up by comparing the two if the regulation does not apply to an area. Reserve places where they do not apply, okay, to ensure continued innovation and to better assess the impact of regulation. Require innovation impact assessments. You know how we require environmental impact assessments for real estate development projects? How about innovation impact assessments of regulations? It's a lot harder. It's trying to anticipate what innovations is this likely to squelch with this regulation. Let me give you an example. There's, you know how many sidewalks have ramps for wheelchairs and other vehicles. It's a very practical thing. However, there is a cost. The cost is investment in prosthetics that are intelligent and wheelchairs that are intelligent. They can climb stairs, go over curbs, and smart prosthetics that enable people to walk on their own without using ramps. And there will always be cases where ramps are not available. So let's be aware that when we do that rule that there have to be ramps, that we're negatively impacting demand for and innovation for and investment in smart prosthetics. Limit the number of words and pages of the regulation. If it's more than 100 pages, people aren't going to read it. They won't be able to anticipate all the unintended consequences. And use sunset clauses. That is, a sunset clause says this regulation expires after N years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Circumstances change. Let it end automatically. If it's still applicable 5 or 10 years from now, great. Let it be explicitly renewed by the congressional body. And create New Hampshires. What do I mean by New Hampshire? Well, New Hampshire is the state of the 50 US states that ranks the freest on the Cato Freedom of the 50 States Index. So aim for things like the lowest tax rates, the lightest regulation, the most efficient administration. Don't try to pick and attract winners. The markets are ecosystems. They evolve. They're not designed from the top down. Just create an attractive environment for all entrepreneurs and industries, and some of them will be successful. If we could predict which ones were going to be successful in advance, we'd all be billionaires and all the innovations would already be here. Adopt and promote patience in a long-term view. And for each jurisdiction, your jurisdiction, wherever you insist that you be the best and the freest. Thank you so much for having me.